Planning Commission was Prime Minister Modi's pet peeve, and in its place he's put in the Niti Aayog. The Niti Aayog has now completed a year in office. To talk about the road ahead, joining us now is the chairman, ARVIND. So appreciate you joining us here on CNBC TV 18. Wish you a very happy new year and congratulations on completing a year in office. I'll come to you on Niti Aayog and the year that's been and the road ahead in just a second. But if I could get you to comment on growth. The last conversation you had with me, you said that you were very confident of 8% plus growth being achieved. Now, the mid-year economic review, the government has itself scaled down the growth target to between 7 and 7.5%. Do you believe 8% and 8% plus kind of growth numbers are looking far-fetched, at least in the foreseeable future?
Well, first of all, thank you and good wishes for the new year to you too. Now, I think in view of the numbers that we have had for the first 2 quarters of the current fiscal year, perhaps, getting to 8% for the entire year might be difficult, although even that cannot be ruled out because some of these growth estimates get revised later on. So we could yet see some upward revision. But I still remain optimistic that, at least for the 4th quarter, that when we get there, we would be touching 8%.
Okay.
And that's consistent with the government's forecast of average of 7.5%. If the first 2 quarters are not revised.
But if I could ask you to comment on what we're seeing happen as far as global factors are concerned. China is the big dragon in the room, so to speak, and we're seeing how the Chinese stock markets are reacting practically every other day to the news that's coming in from China. That is worrying global markets at this point in time, including ours. How concerned are you about the impact of the slowdown in China on global growth? Our exports have been declining for 10 straight months. What will it mean then for India? Because without export-led growth, the 8% plus kind of number looks, a far cry.
Yeah. Well, to me, at the end of the day, global economy is whether or not or how fast global economy grows is less important. What is much more important is what we do here at home. Let me explain. Now, China grew from 1995 onwards, or even before that actually, but at 10% China has been growing for the last 3 decades. Take the figures from 1995 to 2013 for OECD growth. Only 1.4%. It's not as if China grew because OECD countries were growing very rapidly. It was because China did the right things, and its own share in the world markets, merchandise exports, rose from 2.3% in 1992 to today more than 12%. That is what we need to do.
Okay.
Do the right things so that we acquire. Today, our share in the world exports is only 1.75%. This is on merchandise exports. Service will be a little bit more. Take this to 6% in the next 5 to 6 years. I think that's what we need to do.
Okay. At this point in time, it doesn't look like the export picture is going to improve significantly, even though the government is putting out arguments saying that the fall is really not that significant if you actually, do away with the fall as far as oil is concerned. But I'll get to exports in just a second. Also, a quick comment on the recent yuan devaluation and what that will mean as far as Indian exports are concerned.
Yeah. No, I think this does. Obviously, if yuan depreciates and therefore we relative to yuan appreciates, it does impact our ability to export to the markets where we are actually competing with China. It's not only relevant for the Chinese market, but it's also relevant for the third markets where we are competing against China. So it certainly matters. And in that context, clearly, part of the reason our exports are doing not quite very well is that rupee actually, though it may not have appreciated a whole lot against the dollar, against a lot of the other currencies, it has appreciated in real terms particularly.
Okay. Let me then ask you as far as, the next big economic event, and that a lot of people believe could be the next trigger as far as trying to jumpstart growth in the domestic market, and that is the budget. The consultation process has now started. What can the contribution be as far as the Niti Aayog is concerned from the budget perspective? I know that the Prime Minister has set up groups to look into what could be the possible ways that we could see recommendations being implemented in the budget. What are the timelines that we're looking at, and what is the emphasis or the slant of what the Prime Minister's ask is?
All right. So now I think the Prime Minister is quite open and his purpose in constituting these groups has been to get the ideas for big changes that may possibly be made. We'll have to wait and see what the groups themselves come back and report. Niti Aayog's contribution, of course, is continuously there. As the Vice Chairman of the Niti Aayog, I sit on most of these meetings, where expertise in specific areas exists within Niti Aayog. We have members who specialize in social sectors, members who specialize in agriculture. There again, if there are issues related to that that are being discussed at meetings with the Prime Minister, the members go and sit there. So we very actively participate in this.
What would you like to see in the budget? What should be the emphasis of this budget? Because if I could call it, this is the halfway mark budget, so to speak. This is going to be the third full budget of this particular government, and the implications of this budget will really be felt in that sense in the election year. So it is a crucial budget for this government. What should the emphasis be as far as budget 2016 is concerned?
Absolutely, it's a very critical budget. I completely agree with you, and it's a little premature for me to speculate. Nevertheless, I'll suggest one area actually where I'd like to see action happen. At the end of the day, I think we just discussed, and I firmly believe that in the end, the large markets are outside. These are the export markets. We tend to focus more on the domestic markets. These are relatively small. We take electronics industry. Our domestic market is 65 billion. The global market is 2 trillion plus. That is where we need to set our eyes. And so I'd like to see us in the next budget actually begin to turn back to the policies that we were actually moving towards 10 years ago, which was to be open, liberal, and capturing the world markets. And we did that very successfully. You know, if you start out 1991, our exports to GDP ratio was only 7%. At its peak, it went up to almost 24-25%. And that happened during a period in which the GDP was growing very rapidly. When we are talking about exports to GDP ratio, GDP in the denominator is growing at 8%. Exports had to grow a lot.
What about agriculture? Because the agricultural distress that we're seeing in large parts of the country at this point in time, and there seems to be a sense that it has not been addressed. Yesterday, I know that the Prime Minister has held a meeting to discuss issues like crop insurance and so on and so forth. But, you know, what would the recommendation from your end be as far as agriculture is concerned?
No, on agriculture, actually, we had a task force on agriculture that the Prime Minister announced back on February 8th, 2015. An occasional paper based on that task force has been now posted on our website, and we suggest a number of different measures, but two very important, or three very important areas, I'd say. One is measures that improve the productivity in agriculture. And these have to do with proper seeds, fertilizer use, etc., etc. There's a large number of, using high-tech agriculture, whole host of measures there. Then there is ensuring that the farmers get remunerative prices. Here, a lot of the states have to actually carry out the reforms, on which we are having discussions with the states on a continuous basis, ongoing basis. I've gone to Andhra Pradesh, I've gone to Rajasthan, and we discuss these things at these meetings, but also more broadly through various other channels.
So what would the specific recommendations be? Of course, things like MSP, higher MSP, etc., will be something that that government will look at, but what would be the other key specific recommendations?
The very important part actually of the reform which is again kind of has not gone fast enough in the last 10, 12 years, is the Agricultural Price Marketing Committees Act reform. A large number of products still remain outside of this reform process, and that is where give farmers full rights to sell whoever they want to sell. Likewise, on the buyer side, allow multiple buyers to enter the market, and that will generate the competition. It will also reduce the participation of too many intermediaries and give farmers better remunerative prices. So that's one set of recommendations we have that this paper makes.